Hello friends, I am Deepak Balodi and we are going to start with the course Electronic Devices and Circuits, that is EDC, with the module 1, very first module of semiconductor devices or semiconductor physics. In the semiconductor theory or semiconductor physics, we basically are trying to justify the need of semiconductors. We'll be trying to identify the carrier concentration, and the ultimate aim or objective of carrier concentration would be to determine the current density at room temperature. So if finally we are getting a sufficient current density at room temperature, that means for commercial applications we can utilize these semiconductors. So very quickly we'll find that intrinsic semiconductors are not sufficient enough to come up with very high carrier concentration, and therefore they cannot give us very good current or current density at room temperature. So this whole theory or this whole module, very first module, will be revolving around to decide and to calculate carrier concentration in order to go for the calculation of total current density or conduction phenomena. But first of all, let us cover the very first topic, some general points. Like very first point is we are all familiar with temperature and energy, but here we'll be slightly using slightly different units for temperature and energy. And let us see for temperature first. For temperature, we'll be using a different unit than centigrade or Celsius, that will be degree Kelvin or simply as Kelvin. So the relation is value in degree Kelvin is equals to so we all are familiar with this scale of temperature, but there was a requirement to identify a different scale for the temperature, and that was degree Kelvin or Kelvin, all because we had to set for the engineering purposes the minimum or the lowest value of temperature, that was 0 Kelvin. So we call it absolute zero. Absolute zero means temperature is equals to 0 Kelvin, and if we calculate from this formula, then this comes as minus 273 degrees centigrade. So any value in centigrade, if added or made an offset by the offset value of 273, we get the value in degree Kelvin. So there is no scaling factor, we should remember, there is only an additive factor. So any change in degree Kelvin will be same as any change in degree centigrade. But here I have mentioned absolute zero because we hypothetically cannot think of any temperature below 0 Kelvin. So this is the temperature what we could have thought of so far, and it has been assumed that any particle or any element in this world will come to almost at rest at this temperature. So at this temperature there will not be any thermal energy. So we'll be looking at thermal energy as well. So first of all, let us talk about the unit of energy. The unit of energy generally is joules in Newtonic physics, but here we are more and more involved with the lower values and lower numeric values of the energy, because this whole course is oriented towards microelectronics or low power electronics. So therefore most of the time we will be encountering with some smaller values of energy. So the joule scale of energy is not highly suitable, because with the unit of joule we may not get the sufficient numeric values, or the values may appear very small. So in order to make them handy and easy to calculate, we basically adopt a newer scale or a newer unit of energy, and that is known as electron volt. It is also highly very good correlated with the electronic system or a system which involves with charges. So therefore preferably here we use the units of energy as electron volts. So 1 electron volt is the unit single unit of energy, and this corresponds to 1 electron into 1 volts. So by definition it is the amount of energy gained or released by 1 electron. This is 1 electron when it moves through 1 volts of potential difference. So when one electron is moved within 1 volts of potential difference, it gains or it releases, it depends whether this 1 volt is high to low or low to high. So therefore the difference in energy which it gains or releases is 1 electron volt. So from this side it is very much clear that this is basically 1 electron into 1 volt. Now anytime whenever we wish to change it into the joule, it is very simple. We can write it 1 electron is basically not the smallest value of charge. The smallest unit of charge or the single unit of charge is 1 coulomb. So we should remember this thing, that 1 electron is not the smallest unit of charge, that is coulomb. So 1 electron corresponds to 1.6 into 10 to the power minus 19 coulomb into 1 volts. So if I club them, 1.6 into 10 to the power minus 19 coulomb into volts, then this gives me joule, the very popular and very well known unit of energy. So this is this much joule. So 1 electron volt is 1.6 into 10 to the power minus 19 joules. So as was expected, as we were trying to come up with a very smaller unit of energy with which or using which we can calculate or we can process some very small amount of energies within microelectronic system or within semiconductor system. So then it is like this. So whenever we have to convert from electron volts to joules or joules to electron volts, we can use this relation. Okay, then very quickly we need to define one very important aspect, and that is one special kind of energy, and that is thermal energy. Thermal energy, or symbolically we can represent it with ET. Thermal energy, as the name itself indicates, that it is the energy in any particle or in any system, basically at microscopic level, at the atomic level, which is governed by or which is governed all due to the temperature. So any temperature above the absolute zero, which is 0 Kelvin, any temperature above that basically corresponds to some thermal agitation, some vibration into the lattice points, and all due to that each and every particle or each and every microscopic particle in this world possesses some thermal energy, and that is given by K into T electron volts. So we should remember that it is K into T, so it is directly proportional to temperature, and here K is Boltzmann's constant in electron volts per Kelvin. Please mind it that the Boltzmann constant with which we are familiar, that is K hatch, or 1.38 into 10 to the power minus 23 joules per Kelvin. So we are only familiar with this kind of this kind of unit of Boltzmann constant. So Boltzmann constant gives us the amount of energy gained or the difference in energy, all due to the change in energy, all due to the change in per unit temperature. So therefore, anytime if we wish to have electron volts to this, we know that we need to multiply this thing with one electron, or this side we have to divide it by Q. So basically K hatch is Q into K. So both are Boltzmann constants. Please remember, both are Boltzmann constant. This Boltzmann constant is one which we are familiar with in the Newtonic physics, and the value is this very well known, very popular value, which is already fed in lots of our computer and software gadgets. But here, because we wish to calculate energy per unit change in energy per unit change in temperature, so here energy we wish to calculate in electron volts. So K would be this, or K will be K bar by Q. So if we are directly writing the thermal energy in electron volts, then this K should be kept as this value. So we can write it K bar T by Q electron volts. So anytime when we wish to define the corresponding voltage to this, because this is the thermal energy, and in electronic system, in the system where we have charges, we can anytime relate the energy, or specifically the electrostatic energy, which is corresponding to thermal energy here, with the potential difference, or with the potential which is already appearing in the units of energy here. So we can define a corresponding thermal voltage and that is Vt, and fundamentally it is defined by Et by Q. With this formula we are very well aware with. So energy or electrostatic energy is Q into Vt, and this energy only corresponds to thermal energy here. So if this thermal energy is translated to the electronic energy, then that is the charge into the thermal voltage, or the voltage which we are calling here thermal voltage. So basically if we do so, then Et Kt by Q, from first one electron volts. So what happens, this is one electron and this is the charge of one electron. So in place of E we had to write one Q only, means 1.6 into 10 to the power minus 19, which is already kept here. So these two corresponds to themselves, which are same. So basically we get here Kt volts. So interestingly, if you see this thing and these two things are exactly same, but if you are making a notion of energy, then this would be called as electron volts, and then it will be energy. But if the same thing you call only as volts, then that will correspond to thermal voltage. And if we want to use this, then K anytime could be written as K bar Q. So Vt can also be written as K bar T by Q. So both the K's are different. So this value of K, if one wants to remember it, is possibly 8.6 into 10 to the power minus 5. Yeah. So it is 8.62 into 10 to the power minus 5 electron volts per Kelvin. So both are Boltzmann constant, but one is with the units of electron volts per Kelvin and one is with the units of joules per Kelvin. So these things will be very frequently coming into the circuit calculations, into a lot of things in the semiconductor theory. And very specifically, if we find these two things at room temperature, room temperature is as a standard defined at the 300 Kelvin. Why this value? Because it's a round off factor, it appears like a very good factor, and this corresponds to 27 degrees centigrade. If you see from this, so 27 degrees centigrade plus 273, this in totality becomes the value in degree Kelvin. So therefore we take room temperature as 27 degrees centigrade. Although this is not a universal value, at different places of this world, this temperature, room temperature, may vary from 10 to 15 degrees to 40 to 45 degree. But just to come up with some standard, with some good value as 300K, it is sufficient only. And also lots of our results in the semiconductor theory or in diode or in electronic circuits, we'll see that 10 or 20 degree centigrade or degree Kelvin difference in temperature will not matter much. So therefore, even if we are not strictly taking 40 degree or 35 degree, we are only taking 27 degree, then it is approximately providing us the same result. So it is not exactly accurate, but we'll cope up and we'll try to exploit the benefit of this wonderful figure. So this is the room temperature. If we try to find ET, as I have said, from this, we keep K as this value and T as 300, we get 0.02, and therefore this is 0.26 volts, and then we can write it 26 milli electron volts or 26 millivolts. So both the values are same. When we read it in electron volts, it becomes energy. When we read it in volts only, it corresponds to thermal voltage. Similarly, if we find both the values at absolute 0, means at T is equals to 0 Kelvin, then it is very simple to find that either it is ET, which is 0 electron volts, or it is VT, which corresponds to 0 volts. So basically, if it is ET, thermal energy is perfectly 0. Either it is electron volts or joule system, it is perfectly 0. That means there is no agitation, there is no thermal vibration, there is no energy in any particle or in any atomic structure of this world or into the any microelectronic system. So everything at this temperature will hypothetically come to at rest. Why we call it hypothetically? Because to achieve this temperature is not very simple. We hypothetically assume that if we keep on lowering the temperature and if somehow we arrive at this value, then all the particles, all the microscopic atomic behavior which is happening all due to the thermal effect will come to at absolute silent, or it will be completely at rest. So absolute silent corresponds to absolute 0, and therefore the name has appeared like this. So now the second very important point is to understand the correlation between atomic structure or the microscopic view with the energy band diagram. So energy band diagram is probably a newer kind of thing which we first encounter into the semiconductor theory. So let's see the correlation between. So generally this energy band diagram or atomic structure which we are going to correlate are generally meant for semiconductor. So this as this whole course or this whole chapter revolves around semiconductor, so definitely the whatever diagram we are going to see here are only for semiconductors, strictly for semiconductors, but some modifications of them could also be understood for some conductors or some insulators, but this thing is strictly or in detailed sense is only applicable for semiconductors. So the very popular example of semiconductor like silicon, germanium, gallium arsenide. So we can take any example, but mainly we'll be considering silicon as this is the most important semiconductor nowadays, and since so many decades it's been the most popular choice in the semiconductor industry. So any silicon atom has 4 valence electron in its outermost shell. So this much information we at least know from the chemistry or from the modern physics, that the silicon atom has it lies in the 4th column of periodic table. So it has 4 valence electrons in its outermost shell, and these 4 valence electrons, they are bounded, or they share their electron with the adjacent neighbor atoms. Like So there is a mesh in 3D, but we cannot draw a 3D diagram, so we can understand this thing is happening here throughout, because silicon is a crystalline material and its lattice structure follows a wonderful regularity or periodicity. So it's a very well defined structure, and each silicon atom, if we focus onto this silicon atom, it basically is having four electrons in its outermost shell. We are basically interested in the outermost shell because these electrons are highly prominent, or they are highly probable to get some transition or to get involved into the conduction phenomena. So therefore the getting one electron, inner electron knockout is not very probable phenomena. Generally the electron which appears or which is present in the outermost shell is highly probable to get detached from its parental atom, and it may contribute in the conduction phenomena. So therefore we are only interested in the outermost shell or the outermost four electrons. So similarly other atoms are also having these four electrons in its outermost shell. And all because it requires at least 8 electrons in the outermost shell to complete its orbit. So therefore, because it cannot donate or accept any electron from the neighbor atom, because already it is having 4 and the neighbor one is also having 4, so it is unlikely to donate or to accept. So therefore it takes the benefit of covalent bond, and it shares any two adjacent atoms, they share their electrons in this fashion. Sorry, one is missing here, one is missing here. Okay, so they basically these bonds are completed with the adjacent atoms, so those atoms are not visible here. So they are not broken bonds, they are completed with their neighbor atoms, which I have not shown here. So this blue mark is not a physical threading or physical tightening. It is basically an assumption, or we basically perceive it like these two electrons are in coordination. So they are in mutual bonding, and that bond is called as valence bond. So as they remain in their covalent bond, they basically remain intact. They basically remain attached with their parental atom. Like this electron's parental atom or parent atom is this electron's parent atom is this. So they will remain attached to their parent atom until and unless the covalent bond is broken. So therefore these electrons are basically very well or very tightly bounded with their parent atom. So now let us draw this is called the atomic structure. And let us draw the energy band diagram. Energy band diagram basically is not a physical thing. We have to assume some picture in our mind that all these particles inside, and we are basically interested in not any particle but mainly those particles or those elements which can contribute to the conduction phenomena. So there are basically two types of carriers which can contribute in the conduction: the electrons, the very well known electrons, and holes. Hole is a different concept than electron, we'll see very soon. So electron and holes, they can move within the material, and therefore they can conduct the electricity or they can conduct the current. So when there are electrons within the material, then any electron possesses some definite amount of energy, or it attains some energy, and those energy levels cannot be exactly same for any two different electrons. So this is Pauli's exclusive principle, that each and every electron will be definitely having some different energy to its and that energy will be unique for it, and it will not be represented, it will not be shared by any other electron. So there are lots of energy levels. So when an electron is well attached to its parental atom, like I must say, if this is tightly attached to the parent atom due to covalent bond. Due to this covalent bond, this cannot be moved anywhere. So this is very well attached to its parent atom, this one. So then this is called valence electron, or its corresponding energy is shown into this level. So this energy band diagram's vertical direction is basically energy, and that too in electron volts we have already discussed. And this whole energy band diagram is basically meant for electrons. Why I am mentioning this? Because after some time we'll be indicating holes energy also here, but fundamentally the energy band diagram is meant for electrons. If we have to fetch any information for the energy of holes, we'll be reversing our theory for electrons. So this side is the increasing amount of energy levels for the electrons, and so we can say that all these electrons which are tightly bound with their parent atom are valence electrons. They cannot move freely, so they cannot conduct the current, they cannot transport the charge. So therefore they are called valence electron, and their energies are shown in this band. So this is called as valence band. And this goes up to minus infinity. So from minus infinity up to a value, the highest value in valence band is indicated by EV, caps lock E, V. So EV is called the valence band edge, the highest energy level or the value of energy, highest energy in the valence band. So all these well attached electrons which cannot move, or which are very well bound with their parental atom, which are very well bound within the covalent bond, are represented here, or their corresponding energy levels are represented here. So like this electron is basically maybe somewhere here at this energy, or this electron which is again free may be somewhere here, and this one may be somewhere. So like there are lots of energy levels like this, and because these energy levels, the spacing between them is so small so that it appears like a band, so it is not a continuous band, but there is a discrete gap, because for any two electrons, whether they are valence, even if they are valence, the energy levels or the energy value, the absolute energy value cannot be exactly same. So therefore there are some discrete gap between all this, but basically we do not indicate into that much deep, and we basically assume roughly that the band is continuous, but actually it is not continuous. After this highest value of energy, when they are well attached with their parent atom, they require sufficient amount of some external force or external energy or some internal energy to get detached from their parent atom, and as soon as one electron gets detached from their parental atom, it becomes free to move within the material, within this atomic structure. And when it is free, then it is indicated by, or its energy is indicated by some energy level in this band. This band is called conduction band. So in short CB, this is in short VB, and the lowest energy level in the conduction band is EC, or the lowest edge of conduction band is EC. So now So now assume at room temperature. So all this diagram we should assume at room temperature, that is 300 Kelvin. Let us play with some figures, some values. There are 10 to the power 22 atoms per centimeter cube for silicon. So all these data I am showing here for silicon. So for silicon there are 10 to the power 22 number of atoms within 1 centimeter cube. Is very small amount of volume. So within this volume, per centimeter cube, so within this volume there are 10 to the power 22 atoms, and like this 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8, so like this we have 10 to the power 22 atoms within 1 cubic centimeter volume. Out of these many volumes at room temperature, only somewhere 10 to the power 10 covalent bonds have broken. So out of this, only, focus on only 10 to the power 10 approx, this is an approximate figure, covalent bonds are broken. So if you only see 10 to the power 10, it appears as a large number, but if you see this 10 to the power 10 is out of 10 to the power 22, then we can say that 10 to the power 10 is almost negligible out of 10 to the power 22. So only 10 to the power 10 covalent bonds have been broken due to the thermal agitation, because we have seen that at room temperature there is still some thermal agitation. So due to some other effects also, there is some lattice vibrations, or due to the temperature. So due to that there is some free carrier concentration. So out of these many atoms, only 10 to the power 10 covalent bonds have broken, and one covalent bond breakage or breaking of one covalent bond corresponds to one electron plus one hole free. So corresponds that one covalent bond breaking corresponds to one hole plus one electron is free. So by the term free means they are now detached from their parent atom. They are not anymore into the covalent bond. They have come out of that bond. So therefore they have come out of the boundation of their parent atom. Like if within this, let's say for this atom, this middle silicon atom, suppose it absorbs some thermal energy, it vibrates this atom, and due to that there happens a phenomena, some random phenomena, due to which, let's say, this bond is broken. This bond breaks. So when this bond breaks, then the electron of this side electron may come out. Now please remember, whenever one covalent bond breaks, it is not like the one stick has become there have become two parts of one stick. It is like the whole energy from the external, due to which the bond has been broken, is been absorbed by only one side. So this electron only has got free, and this still remains intact, or this still remains attached with its parent atom. So this is a random phenomena. Why I chose this has no reason. This is a random phenomena. If some thermal energy is absorbed at this place, at this local region, then this covalent bond has got broken, then maybe this side electron will get free, or this side. Only if one covalent bond breaks, then only one electron gets free. And when it comes out of this covalent bond sharing, then the vacancy here created is indicated as this. So this vacancy which is created here is called free hole, and this is called free electron, obviously. So if one covalent bond breaks, only one side of the electron get detached from its parent atom, or it becomes unbounded from its parent atom, and when it leaves the covalent bond, it leaves one vacancy behind, so that vacancy is called hole. So now this electron and this hole, they are free to move within the semiconductor material, within this 3D material or 3D space, but they cannot come out of material, so they are only free to move within the material. So now if they are free to move within the material, they can transport charge or they can transport energy, because one electron contains 1.6 into 10 to the power minus 19 coulomb charge with negative sign, not negative charge. The hole correspondingly has or consists the same amount of charge with the positive value, so it's a positively charged particle. And this electron is easy to understand, it can move anywhere within the material. So how does this move? There is a confusion that because it is well bounded within the covalent bond, so how will it move? So there is no more a covalent bond between two electrons. Now there is a bonding between, there is a sharing between one electron and one hole. So any nearby electron is willing to minimize its energy, and any particle in this world is trying to minimize its energy. So any electron or any hole which are free, if they come in their neighborhood, in the close proximity, they are likely to combine and they are likely to lose their existence. So it's a natural phenomena. So any electron, nearby electron which is already in the covalent bond sharing, would like to come here and would like to occupy this. So suppose this electron from this side comes here. So if this electron this side comes here, it occupies this place, and here becomes negative, and here becomes a vacancy. So this has got here. So in this view, it appears like electron has moved here. Similarly, this electron now may find this affinity or this tendency to lose its existence. So this electron and this hole, they will recombine. So this comes here and there is created a vacancy here. So this place is filled by electron. So this covalent bond is complete now, this is complete, but this has got one free hole. So in one way you can think of that the electrons are going and they are filling the vacancy, which is hole. But actually this process has been generated all due to the fact that there was one vacancy. Had there been no vacancy, there would not have any flow of electrons like this. So basically the cause is that first of all there was a vacancy, and due to that only the electrons are coming like this, or it appears like a hole is moving like this. So basically this appears like this is the movement of the hole. So in this fashion, this free hole conducts the charge or conducts the electricity or current. So so therefore this one free electron and one free hole, they are the result of breakage of one covalent bond. So similarly, I have said that at room temperature, it's a standard result. It has been found that approximately 10 to the power 10 covalent bonds are broken. So therefore at room temperature, N is number of free electrons, 10 to the power 10 per centimeter cube, and P is number of free holes, 10 to the power 10 centimeter. So they are always generating in pairs and they are always recombining in pairs. So if 10 covalent bonds are broken, then 10 free holes will be generated, 10 free electrons will be generated. So if they are recombining, then the equal amount will be reduced. So this is some standard figure. We will return back to this figure after some time. So breakage of one covalent bond here, like this I had shown as breaking of one covalent bond, and due to this one electron plus one hole is generated. This thing corresponds to, let's say this energy was somewhere here, then it goes like this. So this same phenomena of breaking of covalent bond in atomic structure is understood by a transition. So this effect is same as this. Transition of one electron which is valenced we call it bounded, which is not free to move. One electron from valence band to conduction band, so it becomes unbounded. It becomes unbounded. So as soon as it comes here, or as soon as it becomes free, when it comes here, then its energy is represented by this level. So all the energy levels of those electrons which have got free, 10 to the power 10, their energy will be somewhere in the conduction band. So therefore, this conduction band is the representation of all energy levels which is possessed by, or which is contained by, those electrons which have got free. So therefore, one breaking of covalent bond corresponds to transition of one electron from this to this band. And please also remember, for any breaking of covalent bond or for any transition, it is required to have some minimum amount of energy. It requires to absorb some minimum amount of potential difference or energy, equivalent energy, and that minimum amount of energy from this diagram is very clear. This is this much. So this is the minimum amount of energy for transition, and transition means for breaking of covalent bond. So if you want to get a covalent bond breaking here, then you need to supply at least this. Then there is a probability that any one valence electron which is at the edge of valence band will absorb that energy and will occupy the minimum level of the energy possible in the conduction band. So if we allow any energy which is lesser than this energy difference, then we won't be getting any transition from here to here, or covalent bond will not be broken and electron hole pair will not become free. So therefore this minimum amount of energy is called band gap energy. Band gap or forbidden band gap. Band gap or forbidden band gap, which is given by EC minus EV. The lowest energy levels at the conduction band minus the highest energy level at the valence band. And from the Pauli's exclusion principle and from the detailed atomic model, we know that there is no energy level defined in between, or there cannot be any allowed energy state within this energy band gap basically. So there are lots of energy levels below this EV, there are lots of energy levels above this EC, but there is no possible or allowed energy state within the band gap. Otherwise, if there had been so there would have been a transition from this to this and then this to this. So but in the pure form of silicon or any semiconductor, if there is a band gap between EC and EV, there is no allowed energy state. So the highest energy electron in the valence band, which is still attached with its parent atom, still requires a minimum energy, this one, to go to the conduction band, and then only it can contribute in the conduction, then only it can become free. So this is an understanding between these two diagrams, and it is very, very important, because in semiconductor theory lots of concepts are understood by this, lots of concepts are understood by this. So most of the time we'll be following this, because as you can see it requires less effort and it almost all the information which is being given by this atomic structure. So very frequently we'll be following this. As I said, that the energy band diagram is basically meant for electron. So whenever we have to fetch any information about the hole, then we can reverse our theory. Like for electron, this is the increasing energy value or energy levels. Then for holes, this is the direction of increasing energy. So if we have to understand anything for hole, we can understand it like this. For electron, again I repeat, if electron's energy level is represented here, or if any electron is represented here, then that means that electron is well bound within the covalent bond and it is well attached with its parent atom. It is not free to move. When any energy level is represented here for electron, or any electron is represented here in the conduction band, that means that is a free electron and it can move within the material, it can contribute in the current. Similarly, if a hole is found, or if a hole energy is represented in the valence band, then it is basically the free hole, or it represents the energy of that hole which is free to move within the semiconductor material. And if a hole energy is found here, or if a hole is located here within the conduction band, then basically it meant that hole is well bounded within the atom and it is not free to move. So the name conduction band, valence band and energy levels, everything is fundamentally defined only for electrons. So for holes we will have to reverse our theory every time. One important thing, that there is no absolute value on this vertical scale. Means if you ask me any value of EC, I cannot tell you any value of EV, because this whole scale varies, as I have located here, from minus infinity to plus infinity. So there is no absolute reference available anywhere at the downwards or at the upwards. So we cannot take any numeric figure for EC alone. We cannot take any numeric figure for EV alone. We can only define values in the relative sense. So there is a value possible for EC minus EV. There is a value possible for this minus this. There is a value possible for this level minus this level. But there is no absolute value defined for only EC or for only EV or for any energy band or any energy level alone. So, okay, having learned the correlation between atomic structure and the energy band diagram, now we are ready to appreciate the most genuine question which we should start from, and that is why semiconductor and why silicon. So why semiconductor is a bigger question, and it also considers one small comparison of silicon with other possible semiconductors. So first of all, why semiconductor? The first and foremost point is the crystalline structure of semiconductor. So basically the semiconductors which we are going to use after carbon in the fourth column, that is either silicon or germanium. We do not go much below, because then the element become heavier and they are not very well suitable for the IC technology. So for silicon and germanium in the fourth column, we can see, or we can see that if they are properly processed, then a very well crystalline structure could be obtained, or they form a very well defined crystal. So what if they are crystal? So if some material is found in crystalline format, or if it is a good crystal, then basically the crystal is a very well defined periodic and regular atomic structure. So to appreciate this point, one needs to go for the detailed crystal theory, but that is not possible here. The scope is not that much, as I have told you in the very initial video, that this whole course is focusing on the gate pattern, and the questions from crystalline theory or crystal theory are not very common in this gate paper. So, and also the crystal theory in itself is a rigorous theory. If somebody wishes to go for that, he or she can go for some modern physics or some chemistry literature to understand that. But some very brief understanding of crystal theory is only required here. That a crystalline material or a crystal is a very well defined periodic and regular atomic structure. So if some structure is very regular, very well defined, then what advantage we can take is its chemical, physical and electronic. So electronic is made up by these two things only, and electronic properties are also well defined. also well defined and predictable. So if the uh, configuration in terms of chemical, physical and electronic behavior is very well defined, is already predictable, then we can utilize that material or utilize that semiconductor basically in lots of applications, in lots of processings which are required to come up for the integrated circuits manufacturing. So these 2 points are very helpful for the IC manufacturing processes. And also, once somebody or some material is having a crystalline nature, it is basically a solid state material. So it provides a good mechanical base or mechanically strong base, strong background to start with. So it is mechanically strong and supports IC technology. So lots of processes are happening from the top, so we need some solid material into which we can dope something which can withstand lots of pressures, temperatures. Lot of processings are happening, high temperature, high pressure or low pressure processes are happening. So we need some material which is hard, which is very solid, and which also allows lots of chemical processes to happen within. So that has been found only due to this kind of structure of the semiconductors, mainly, as I have said, silicon, germanium, and one very popular example is gallium arsenide also. So we are mainly focusing on to this, but these two are also very popular examples. So this is the first region, and the second region is the favorable energy band gap. Now we are in a situation to understand this because we have already seen the correlation between atomic structure and energy band diagram. So now we can very well understand this point. It tells you that if we plot it for, let's say, conductors, then if we plot it for insulators, and then if we plot it for semiconductor, in short I am writing S by C, so that is semiconductor. So if I plot the energy band diagram for all this, so it has been found that in conductors, though energy band diagram is not the very accurate definition or explanation of the atomic structure inside, but because we have to compare these three scenarios, so therefore we are also reflecting or making some equivalent scenario here. So for conductors, if this is the conduction band, then this is the valence band. So as you can see, the conduction band and valence bands are overlapping with each other. It basically means that there is no difference between valence electrons and free electrons and conduction electrons. Basically all the electrons are already free. So lots of or plenty of carriers are already in free state or in free mode. So if it is so, then we cannot effectively control them. You understand one very important point, that in semiconductor theory, or basically in general in electronics, we are trying to achieve the control over the current. For electrical terminology or for electrical engineering, it is sufficient to say that we are only trying to generate the current and voltage characteristic at the terminals, but in electronic we are inside the system, we are inside the material or inside the devices, and we basically want to achieve the additional control over the flow of electrons or over the flow of current. So we are not only generating the healthy current, we are also trying to achieve some control over that current. So if we are basically trying to achieve control over the conduction phenomena, we just do not want to generate it and become free, and that's not the total work. So in that case, we are looking for a scenario where the amount of carriers could be controlled by some external phenomena. So in the scenario of conductors, there are already plenty of free carriers available. So as soon as you apply some electric field, they all will be running, they all will be responding to it, and therefore it will be like water in an ocean. You cannot make a dam for an ocean, because there is a lot of water which is uncontrolled water which you cannot control. So therefore this is like that scenario. Then secondly, come to the insulator. Here the energy band diagram tells you that there is a huge gap between this is the conduction band, this is the valence band. There is a huge gap. So the energy band gap is huge. So this is of the order from 6, 7 to 15 electron volts. So this value of energy band gap, generally around 9 to 10 or 12 electron volts, is such a high value to overcome at the commercial electronics or at the commercial applications. We cannot easily overcome this. So when we are allowed with the 5 volts or 6 volts of supply only, then it is very difficult to overcome this. And even if we somehow achieve this, and we try to compensate this band gap by some 15, 20 or 30 or 40 volts of supply, still it is a probability that some transition will occur, and still we are not sure whether lots of free carriers will be generated. And even before the carriers are generated, there will be some material rupturing effect or some material breakdown will happen. So therefore we cannot overcome this band gap. So in totality, we can say the bottom line is that this huge band gap of insulators basically is not easily manageable. It is not easily controlled. So it is like a dry tunnel. Like we make an analogous non-technical example of ocean water. This is like a dry tunnel. There is nothing to control. Means it's already dry. There is no water into it. So what to make dam for? So it's like that. So we are basically looking for some river or some tunnel where there is some amount of water which could be controlled. So that is the scenario of semiconductor, whose conduction phenomena lies within the conductor and semiconductor and insulator, or whose band gap lies within these two scenarios. Like we have already seen that here the band gap is of the order of 1 to 2 electron volts, less than 2 only. So within this range of band gap could be easily overcome. It is not so small so that every time at low temperature all of the carriers are going to the conduction band. It is not so small, and it is not so high so that we cannot overcome it at the commercial applications. So it is easily manageable. So this excellent figure of band gap is very strong reason behind the very frequent use and very popular use of semiconductors into the modern electronics. So because we have now understood that if we make some transition, then only we can increase the number of free carriers, yani free electrons here and the free holes here. So lots of transitions, and transition can only happen if we overcome this band gap. So there are two basic phenomena or two basic methods to overcome this. One is temperature and one is applying some external impurities. So that we'll be looking on later, but due to some external phenomena or due to some temperature effects, the transition can only happen. Due to temperature, these transitions are not frequent, or there are negligible transitions, because at room temperature we have already seen the thermal energy at room temperature is 0.026 electron volts. So this much low energy cannot overcome this. So if there is a very favorable case that an electron is already, it has governed lot of energy and it is already at the edge of leaving its this, then momentarily it can find some momentarily some additional or some in between temporary energy state, and then it can jump over there. So that may happen in some extreme cases. Otherwise, this thermal energy at room temperature is not sufficient enough to produce lots of transition or to produce any transition in fact. So due to the temperature, there are almost negligible free carriers available that we have already seen. So the free carriers here are 10 to the power 10 electrons per centimeter cube, and here we have 10 to the power 10 holes per centimeter cube. So please do not confuse and do not get any prediction from these huge numbers. They are not huge because there are 10 to the power 22 atoms or such number of covalent bonds available. So out of that we have not exploited much. So still lots of breaking or lots of free carriers to be generated still. So this excellent figure of this manageable energy band gap makes semiconductors a very favorable choice for modern day electronics. So now let us come to a smaller question, that is why silicon, and simultaneously see some other reasons for semiconductors. So for that we'll be locating the periodic table position of the semiconductors, and for silicon specifically. Then there is a third column, and there is a fourth column, and there is a fifth column mainly which we are interested in. Then third column starts with boron, aluminum, gallium, indium, thallium. Fourth column starts with carbon, silicon, germanium, tin, and lead. Fifth column starts with nitrogen, phosphorus, arsenic, antimony, and bismuth. Like that we have others, but it is only sufficient to see up to this. So this is the favorable column because we started our semiconductor theory by illustrating the fact that we are basically exploiting the use of or the breaking of covalent bond, and covalent bond is basically formed in a case when the outermost electron is not easily donated or not easily accepted, and that can happen only if there are four electrons in the outermost shell, and that happens with the candidates of fourth column. So mainly these two elements are very popularly used for the semiconductor industry, by the semiconductor industry. But why not carbon? So there are some small reasons behind that, some various reasons. First of all, found in nature in a non-suitable form. Like it is found as a coal or graphite, or in fact if you process it properly it is diamond. So these two are not crystal, and this is very hard crystal. You see, there are two extremes. They are amorphous materials which cannot be utilized, as we have already started our theory by again illustrating the fact that we are basically tempted to use the crystalline properties. And this one is definitely crystal, though the making and manufacturing of this is quite difficult, and it becomes difficult and expensive only because this is the hardest material available on earth. So the cutting and polishing and making some manufacturing process onto the diamond will be very expensive and very difficult. So therefore it is not suitable for a method where we have to do lots of high temperature and low pressure processings, and lots of various chemical and physical processes have to go. In that scenario, this is not suitable. So therefore the carbon is not in the good physical shape and in the good physical appearance, so therefore it cannot be used. One small point is that this is a lighter element, as this is the very first element of the fourth column, with the smaller nuclear size and smaller weight. So this is a lighter element, and a lighter element is not suitable because then we cannot have a mechanical strength for that material. So for all those reasons, when we go down, the very next one, silicon, is on the reverse side, is highly suitable for that. Silicon also is not found in that form which is utilizable in the industry. So silicon is generally found in the form of silica, but very effectively and with very cheap processes we can find or we can develop some EGS or electronic grade silicon, which is very highly pure state of silicon. Then we can, out of EGS, from EGS we can create a very well defined crystalline silicon, that is also known as single crystal silicon. So those processes in the early days were not very cheap, they were highly exhaustive processes. But nowadays, because the rapid growth of silicon industry or semiconductor industry have facilitated by so many physical and chemical tools and processes, so now those processes have become cheaper, and we have achieved a lot of excellence in those processes. So therefore silicon is most favorable element for the semiconductor. Germanium is also in the well suitable form, and as soon as we go much below, then these two elements, they become heavier element, means their atomic size and their weight becomes heavier. So again, they do not allow lots of fabrication processes or integrated circuit processes to happen onto them. So if they do not allow, we cannot utilize them into the integrated circuit manufacturing processes. So therefore these two still remain the most viable choices for the semiconductor industry. Then for the doping processes, in the next topic we'll see that these elements will be used. So we should not talk now, but one more element has become very popular. So if we combine gallium and arsenide together, then there appears gallium arsenide. So this element has also proved very well for lots of high frequency applications. So to understand that and to differentiate between these several things, we'll have to prepare some list of some important properties of the semiconductors. So let us make that list first.